Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms.
In all of its forms.
If it's written work, it's game.
It's game.
Let's meet the panel.
Eerie Echo. Hi, Jim.
I'm Dan.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Josh.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Charlie and Jim, welcome back. Dan, welcome to the panel.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
It's very nice to have you here. Dan's a good friend of mine from college. What are we going over today, Lainey?
Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Ooh.
Yes.
Now,
Sure. bloodsucking.
You like that word, Dan.
Yeah, I'm into that stuff.
Big vampire person. That's why we had you. First
okay,
question.
panel. Why tell the story through letters, journals, and diary submissions?
Alright, I've written extensively on this because I've taken a bunch of courses in Victorian Lit. Now, the idea of... There's a big idea throughout this text of speech versus writing. Like, Harker says once when he's compiled his diary with his wife Mina, he's like, of all the proofs we have assembled, there is not one authentic document. So he's like, he says that once something's been written, it sort of becomes unreal. And he's concerned about the audience's reception already because nobody is going to believe him when he says, I fought against a vampire. So the idea of writing sort of plays into that skepticism. And meanwhile, when Harker first meets Dracula, he is struck by the Count's speech. He says, he speaks in excellent English with a strange intonation. And then Dracula says, sure, I know the words, but I know not how to speak them. It is from you that I learn, and all this. So there's this whole wage war between speech and writing, where it's like, which will be privileged?
It also provides various viewpoints. It provides Harker and his immediate intimidation by the vampire. It provides Manic from Dr. Seward. It provides a bit of concern toward Mina, wondering about her husband. The viewpoints captivate how everybody is beginning to feel, and by that way, it provides different angles of terror toward the vampire.
I think it also gives like the book some more realism, like you're actually reading someone's diary about like the horrors that they went through meeting Dracula. Like you see the viewpoints of like Harker, Mina, Van Helsing, like all these different characters that you meet in the book that all come into one huge story. And it seems like you're reading someone's actual diary, kind of like the Diary of Anne Frank. You know, kind of like you read different entries that she wrote, and the thing is, that's what he wanted. I feel that's what he wanted to do with the book as well, try to make it seem like it was a real story.
Question. Do you think Mary Shelley, well, in Frankenstein, I know I'm going off course a little bit, but this...
Same period.
Yeah.
Well, Frankenstein's romantic, Dracula's Victorian,
Yeah,
but relatively same period.
Yeah. She wrote the letters, or, well...
Yeah, Frankenstein did provide the different viewpoints,
I'm going off what Dan
even
said.
toward the monster, which, but with Dracula, it seems to it clarifies it a bit better with whose diary or whose journal it's from,
Okay.
what date it was written.
Okay.
As much as we don't, even the one that you have a direct victim off of Renfield, who we don't hear from him, but we do hear from people who are treating him, and he's the immediate...
You don't hear from Quincy either.
No, you don't hear from Quincy at all, either, but you're hearing from different people how they were affected heavily by Dracula.
That's because, well, the whole careful thing with the dating and all of that is that it's the carefulness of Mina's editing.
Mm-hmm.
Because Harker has wanted these proofs to be perfect because they're already so incredible, you know. Anyway, the preface, right there, there's this preface to the table of contents where it says, how these papers have been placed in sequence will be made manifest in the reading of them. All needless matters have been eliminated so that a history almost at variance with the possibilities of latter-day belief may stand forth as simple fact. There is throughout no statement of past things wherein memory may err, for all the records chosen are exactly contemporary, given from the standpoints and within the range of knowledge of those who made them. Now, this idea, there's a twofold appeal to the Victorian ideas here. The first is the assertion of simple fact, it's playing on empiricism, the idea of that there's a scientific means of knowing that it's like things have to be provable, you have to have like hard data.
Like science?
Yes, that's the scientific method.
Oh.
It's the Victorian conception of the scientific method. And then second, you have that simulation of contemporaneous narrative where it's like everything that is written as it is occurring. That occurs in other epistolary novels from the Victorian period, especially The Woman in White. And Frankenstein is romantic, but I don't know if Frankenstein claims to be contemporary, does it?
It's romantic. It's 1821. It's
I mean, in terms of the narrative, are the letters arranged claimed to be written as they happened?
claim. I would say.
Alright. So,
I'll have to look up on that.
so it's drawing from like the same sort of, it's tapping the same vein as Frankenstein.
It's playing in the same drum.
Next question.
Alrighty. Would you consider this to be a work of horror fiction?
Yes.
Most definitely, yeah.
I mean, anything that's sucking your blood.
I think that, with the exception of Vlad the Impaler, this is the direct connection to that legend, and that this is the creation. This is the root of a genre. This is this Edgar Allan Poe. You could say H.P. Lovecraft as well if you want to, but the way that it Dracula terrorizes people, feel emotions of fear.
That's terror.
So
It's a different type of horror. It's not like the horror, with jump scares or anything like that. But like Dracula, it's got like suspense, and like Dracula is just, he makes you feel unsettling, uncomfortable.
Yes.
You get that eerie feeling.
Is that you want to grab
reading.
you want to grab the shotgun when you're reading because you're so scared.
Yeah, like you sometimes get a chill down your spine. Sometimes reading about like, I mean, like the thing is, he kills people, and the thing is, he's a murderous bloodsucker. That's what we know. Or he's probably killed more people even before we even read what happens in the book. Because he's been alive for 600 years, so obviously he's been doing a lot of things. He's undead, and I think that's just creepy in its own right.
Well, it's key that you bring up the notion of Dracula being a work of horror that unsettles, not a work of horror that's about the thing under the bed, because that raises a question of epistemology. How do we know what constitutes horror? And for a lot of critics, there's been this argument that Dracula represents the other, the threat to English imperialism. As England was expanding and colonizing other countries, particularly India, and English colonialism was rampant during the Victorian period. So it's like, how do we deal with this influx of otherness? Are we threatened? Is our security as a people going to be compromised when we have this foreign blood coming to our shores?
And the one thing that makes Dracula horror and literature is that it's original. I would say that as well.
Agreed.
Yes.
How did Stoker approach the vampire?
I would have to say Dracula at the time it was written was original. I mean, vampire stories had been written before, but vampires were written as like these black creatures with demon-like looks, and the fact that they would wear black robes and stuff out
Those
of
fangs.
things that exist. But Dracula was new. He was different. He had a charming look. His skin was pale. He had sharp canine teeth, which is stuff that people didn't have of vampires at the time. So in its right, it was original. However, now vampires have become different, more advanced. Now they have claws, they have multiple sharp teeth, and they can't go out in the daylight, which is something that was different in Dracula.
the sunlight started in the 1922 silent film Nosferatu, where Max Schreck's Count Orlok was feasting, drinking the blood of a woman, and the sunlight came about, and he just burst, disappeared, and they showed just his castle at the end. But there are plenty of other trends that have been connected to Dracula that many of them did not originate in this novel.
This is actually a twofold question, because there's how Stoker presents the vampire's corporeality, how he describes his body, and how he describes his personality. There's this whole idea of when he's talking about the body, and Dracula is laying in his coffin at one moment in the novel. Even the deep burning eyes seemed set amongst swollen flesh, for the lids and pouches underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. It's all very blood-centered. There's these images of engorgement and 3 men on the panel. What does that sound like to you?
Rated M for mature audiences.
Now, panel, how do you feel Dracula and other vampires have evolved in their portrayal following Bram Stoker's portrayal of Dracula in this novel?
Depends on where we want to stop.
Yeah.
I feel, well, the thing is, like, I would say like the vampires up to 2000 were pretty good before a certain book came out for tweens. Ruined vampires. I would have to say vampires before that in the horror genre were pretty decent, I would have to say. I mean, I love Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I also love some of the new vampires that had come out afterwards.
But not the one we're gonna not the one that's
not that one.
My favorite is the way that they, the Nosferatu, and the way that he's portrayed in 1922 with Max Schreck, 1978 with Klaus Kinski. Stephen King portrays vampires in this fashion through Salem's Lot as well.
Yeah, because the vampires have been portrayed pretty well. Like, for example, Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a pretty good myth of vampires. You know, they couldn't be invited, if they couldn't come into a house unless they were invited. They were warded off by, what's it called? Crucifixes, garlic. Yeah, you stab them, they turn to dust. They can be staked.
They don't see the reflections.
Steak? What kind
They
of steak?
had no reflection. Like, you know, stab them in the heart.
Oh,
You know, if I ever
really?
take this and just go, oh my god! And you turn to dust.
Okay.
So the thing is, like, yeah, vampires have evolved since then, and then, like, you know, a certain book comes out, and now vampires sparkle in daylight. You know?
Yeah, they sparkle, and they're more about...
Personally, I prefer vampires to burn up in sunlight, even though it's not in the original Dracula, but I feel that sunlight should have an effect on vampire if you're writing a story about a vampire.
Well, vampire literature has taken something of a twofold path. There's been vampire narrative that addresses queerness and otherness, as Dracula does, and there's vampire narrative that's very much sanitized and very much about a hegemonic vampire, a vampire that's in accord with the mainstream agenda, you know, that can blend into the world as we know it, even though it feeds on the world as we know it.
I'm going to take your point. You're saying that it doesn't just have to be in the area of queerness, more so just the romantic area in general.
When you say queer, you mean weird, right?
Well, queer as like a challenge to the cishet majority,
Okay.
a challenge to what is accepted as the norm.
Alright,
You have Dracula as a horror, or the vampire in the horror piece, and you have the vampire in the romantic piece too.
Two totally different things.
You either a vampire is portrayed as a vicious villain or as a suave, manipulative villain, or a little bit of both. Probably Bela Lugosi's Dracula from 1930 would be the most accurate.
Or you get the anti-hero vampire with like Lestat and Anne Rice,
Mm-hmm.
or Marius.
Actually, I don't consider Bram Stoker Dracula movie was actually the most accurate.
At that, please.
That would make sense. Give
And
credit
then
that they're
monologue.
going to, they're trying to follow the novel piece of this.
It does. It goes into like different things. Okay.
Does anybody have any final thoughts about this work?
It's a blood-sucking good book.
Quite a trend. If you're interested in picking up a copy of Dracula, I got this copy that the panel frowns upon,
I do.
but I got it for a good buy at the flea market.
Goodbye.
Which reminds me that if you're looking for this, you could find it at just about any outlet. They have them at bargain places, they have them at book swaps, they have them at Barnes & Noble, they have them online. But I would probably
Flea
take the
markets.
route of looking for the cheaper price, because the chances of you finding Dracula for a reasonable price within the first 3 locations that you
And in modern English
attend
too.
are very common and likely.
I was just going to say, I think the Norton Critical was $14 when I got it.
Ooh. It depends. If you want something annotated and
Yeah.
with commentary, then yes. But if you're just looking to read the novel, then look for maybe $5 and you should be set. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.